I feel like choosing the right paints and pigments to help your artwork stand the test of time can actually be a real challenge. There's so many manufacturers out there and there's so much information out there. It's like, how do you choose? I have been doing a lot of research lately, and I feel like I've come up with a pretty solid list of paints and pigments that will help your work stand the test of time. So I'll try to make it as simple and as straightforward as possible. Okay, so first things first, let's talk about what the information on a tube of paint means. So up here you have the brand name, and then you have the level of paint. So for example, Winsor & Newton makes a couple different lines of paint. One is called Artist, which is what I've got in my hand, and that's the professional grade paint. They also make another line called Winton, which is the student grade paint. And student grade paints will often have fillers or dryers in them, and they won't contain as much pigment. They're not as high quality, in other words. And it's fine if you're just literally starting out, but the more you paint and the more you want to make work that lasts, the more you will want to use artist level paint. So you see here what kind of paint it is. It's oil paint. And then you see the name of the paint. This is ivory black. So below you see permanence and then AA. This means very permanent. The lower ratings are A and then B. B is the lowest. Underneath, and permanence refers to the chemical stability of the paint. Below this you see series 1. That means it's the least expensive, it's the least rare. As you go up in series like series 2, 3, 4, 5, it becomes more expensive. And then right here you just see the paint swatch. Often these are actually not very accurate. It's kind of interesting, I don't know why, but a lot of paints look different or slightly different than the sort of paint on the front. And then you just see the size, how much paint is in this tube. On the back, you'll see the pigment. So in this case, it's PBK 9. And this just means pigment black 9. And that is ivory black. And then you see underneath the vehicle or the binder. In this case, it's linseed oil. And then below that, you see light fastness. The light fastness level is usually 1 or 2. I try to work with paint that is 1, which is excellent. That's how well paint will hold its color or remain the same color over time. And paint with the level 1 or 2 are considered light fast, which means, over 100 years of normal light conditions, like museum type of lighting, these paints will look the same. Below that, you don't want to use. And here, not all paints have this, but many of them will. It'll just say conforms to ASTM D4236. And that means, any of the hazards for this paint will be listed somewhere on the tube. Usually with this AP in the middle, it means not toxic. Actually, I have a book here that shows. Another label that you might see is CL, and that means there's usually more hazards or toxic risks in the paint. And those should be listed on the paint tube as well. This book is an excellent resource for anyone who wants to understand more about their art materials. It's called The Painter's Handbook by Mark David Gotzigan, and he was chairman of the ASTM for a while, and he helped establish their standards for art materials. So I thought he would be a great place to start as a reference point for pigments. He's got about 40 pages in this book where he outlines all the different pigments and their different characteristics, and it was very informative. I basically took the best of the best and I distilled it into this spreadsheet. I've added a link below to this so you can access it and download it if you want and use it for your own reference. Something that surprised me when I was reading Mark's book and doing other research was that there's a couple of really common pigments out there that you might want to take off your palette. For example, alizarin crimson, which is PR83. It's got subpar light fastness. Another pigment, PW4, which is zinc white, more and more research is coming out suggesting that it is brittle and over time will delaminate and crack. And so zinc white, it's kind of sneaky. It makes its way into a lot of blended colors, and a lot of manufacturers will actually sell it on its own. But other manufacturers like Michael Harding are taking it out of their offerings. So just pay attention, flip over those paint tubes and see if PW4 is listed. Personally, with regards to white, I like titanium white, which is PW6. It's the brightest of the whites. I like using the brightest whites and the blackest blacks. So that's PBK 9, which is the ivory white that I just showed you earlier, and then titanium white, which is PW6. As you can see behind me, I like to have a lot of contrast in my work, so that suits me. Other artists who are a little more old school will prefer using the old school pigments. So for example, lead white, which not every manufacturer makes because it contains lead. But lead white, which is PW1, you can still find. Michael Harding makes it, for example. He actually makes a few different versions of it. It has a unique texture and it's strong, but it's not as bright as titanium white. And so some artists that paint in a sort of in the tradition of the Dutch masters will sort of compensate by making the things around the lead white that they use darker, so it pops more. What I'm getting at is a lot of choices around pigment at some point just becomes your preference. You'll be able to recognize artists by the palettes that they use. A lot of artists will use similar colors in each painting, and it'll help you recognize their work. So I would say you'll come up with, over time, your own unique palette, just like I am right now. And I'll include below a couple examples of palettes. One is what I would recommend to a beginner. It's called a limited palette, and it only has 8 colors. And with it, you would be able to paint anything you wanted. But you won't have the full range of colors. And I'll include what colors are on my palette. So like what I'm painting my wildlife paintings with. So you can just get a sense of how many colors you really need. Like I only consistently use about 12 to 14 colors in my work. And I feel like this is starting to give my work a certain look and feel. And I think every artist over time develops their own look and feel. So I'd encourage you to test out different colors, test out different brands, and see what you like. But check out the spreadsheet. Everything on it is a great color, a great pigment, and a great place to start. And from there, you can figure out what works best for you. All right, let me know if you have any questions. I will do my best to answer, and happy painting.